Hello, everyone, and welcome. Have you ever stopped to think about that feeling? That feeling of belonging? Or the opposite, that feeling of being on the outside looking in? Well, today, in this explainer for your AMC baccalaureate exam, we're going to take that very personal feeling and blow it up to a national scale. We're going to look at how entire societies try to build a sense of unity when they're made up of so many different people from all walks of life.
So let's kick things off with these two massive questions. What does it actually mean to belong? And maybe even more importantly, who gets to decide? These questions really cut to the heart of what we're talking about today. Identity, community, and of course power. Who gets to draw that circle and say, you're one of us?
And, as you know, this isn't just a random discussion. This fits right into the core of your AMC program. We are smack in the middle of theme 1, Faire, société, which is all about how we build communities. And our specific focus, our axe that dude, is unity and diversity. Unity and diversity. Honestly, getting your head around this tension is absolutely essential for your exam.
Right, so to make sure we stay on track and really dig deep, we need a clear guiding question. Think of this as our compass for the whole session. It's what will keep our analysis sharp and focused as we navigate some pretty complex ideas.
And here it is. This is the big problem we're going to be wrestling with today. How do you balance the need for a single unified national identity with the fundamental rights and distinct identities of all the minority groups that make up that nation? It's a real balancing act.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll nail down some key definitions. Then, we'll jump into some real-world case studies from Britain and India to see how this stuff actually works. After that, we'll shift gears and get super practical with some methodology for your exam, and finally, we'll tie it all together in the conclusion. Ready? Let's dive in.
Okay, first things first. Before we can answer our big question, we need to get on the same page about two absolutely crucial concepts from contemporary theory: identity and representation.
So, identity. You might think it's simple. It's just who you are, right? Well, the thinkers we're studying would say it's way more complicated than that. They argue that identity isn't some fixed, stable thing you're born with. Instead, it's something that's constantly being made and remade in relation to others. You basically define who you are by defining who you are not. It's a dynamic process, not just a label.
This little phrase sums it all up perfectly. No identity without difference. Think about it. An identity only has meaning because it's different from other ones. The whole idea of being British, for example, is built by contrasting it with what is seen as foreign or other.
And that brings us right to our second key idea: representation. This is all about how different identities are shown or portrayed in the media, in our laws, in our culture. And here's the kicker. These portrayals are never, ever neutral. They are battlegrounds. They are where groups fight for the power to define themselves and to define others. This is literally where the politics of belonging happens.
All right, so we've got these two big ideas. Identity is relational, and representation is a battlefield. So what? Well, let's make it concrete. We're going to look at a famous legal case from the UK involving a student named Shabina Begum to see these abstract concepts in explosive, real-world action.
Okay, so here's the breakdown. Shabina Begum, a Muslim student, wanted to wear a specific religious garment, the jilbab, to school. The school said no, citing its uniform policy. Now look closely at their arguments. The school claimed, our uniform creates unity and inclusion for everyone. But Shabina Begum argued back, no, true inclusion means respecting my right to express my religious identity. Do you see what's happening? They're both using the word inclusion, but they mean completely different things. It's a perfect example of a conflict over representation.
Now, those who argued against Shabina's request often used something called a slippery slope argument. You probably heard it before. It's the whole, well, if we allow this, what's next? The thing is, this kind of argument isn't powerful because it's logical. It's powerful because it plays on existing, often unspoken fears in society. Fears about otherness. Fears that one small change could lead to chaos. It's a really effective rhetorical weapon for exclusion.
Okay, let's widen our lens now. To really get a grip on unité and plurality, it's super helpful to look at another context. So let's travel across the world to India, another major English-speaking country and a key member of the Commonwealth. The situation there gives us a really different and fascinating way to think about this whole unity versus diversity problem.
In India, certain strands of Hindu nationalist ideology take a very different approach. Here, the idea isn't so much about negotiating different cultures living side by side. Instead,
The focus is on defining one single, authentic national identity. And this identity is often built by positioning the country's largest minority group, Muslims, as the other.
So how exactly is this done? Well, it's done through the power of storytelling, specifically through historical narratives. For example, certain historical interpretations are used to create the story of an ancient, pure Hindu nation. In that specific telling of history, Muslims are represented not as an integral part of India, but as the descendants of foreign invaders. This is a perfect, if troubling, example of how history itself can be used as a tool to construct a national we, by defining a them who, according to that narrative, just don't belong. Okay, we've wrestled with the theory, and we've picked apart two really complex case studies. Now for the bit you've all been waiting for. How do you actually turn all of this analysis into brilliant marks on your baccalaureate? It all comes down to one thing: method.
This is your recipe for success for both your written papers and your oral exams. It's a simple three-part structure. First, you state your idea, loud and clear. Then you back it up with a specific example or a sharp quote from the text. And finally, and this is the most important part, you explain how that example proves your point and ties back to the big theme of unity and plurality. So remember, idea, example, explanation. Simple, powerful, and effective.
And if you really want to level up your analysis, you've got to use precise academic language. Let's just quickly look at 5 words that are absolute gold. Constitutive. Remember how we said difference is constitutive of identity? It's an essential part of it. Contingent. Our identities are contingent. They're not set in stone. Hegemony. That's about the dominance of one group's ideas, like the school's view of the uniform. Articulation. How different ideas, like history and foreignness in India, are linked together. And otherness. That state of being defined as different, which we saw in both of our case studies. Using these words correctly will make your argument so much more powerful.
So, after all that, what's the bottom line? Let's pull all these threads together and try to give a clear answer to that guiding question we started with.
I think if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that inclusion is not a finish line you cross. It's not a simple, one-time act. It's a constant, messy, political process. It's an ongoing negotiation and struggle over who we are and how we're represented.
So back to our question, how do English-speaking societies manage this tension? Well, what our case studies from Britain and India strongly suggest is that the very act of creating a unified we often depends on defining and excluding a them. It seems like the line between who's in and who's out is constantly being drawn and redrawn, whether it's in a school's dress code or a nation's history books. And that leaves us with one last, really challenging question that I want to leave with you. If every time we draw a circle to include a group of people, we are, by definition, creating an outside, then what does unity in diversity actually mean in the real world? Is true inclusion even possible? There's no easy answer. And that's exactly the point. It's something for you to think about. Thanks so much for your attention today.